Good morning and welcome to Liverpool Transfer Daily with me, James Martin. Today I'm joined by Ben Bocsak of Liverpool.com. Apologies for the slight delay in the start. I was getting a bit too into one of my articles for the day, so make sure you check out Liverpool.com to see the cause of the delay a bit later on. But yeah, it's the morning after the night before. Liverpool, of course, a very disappointing result against Manchester United, a disappointing performance as well, really. 2-1, perhaps made it seem a bit closer than it was for large periods. Ben, how do you reflect on the game?
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing in terms of the performance, but I think I still have to agree with Klopp on what he said towards the end. I think Liverpool could have won it. I mean, United had chances, but if you look at some of Liverpool's chances, I think there's still definitely potential there for a draw in terms of the chances that Liverpool created, especially towards the end of the game. And I felt like towards the end of the second half and towards the end of the first half as well, Liverpool had more control in the game. And I just think, given the context that there was 7 first-team players out injured, and United had basically everyone fully fit, and had the luxury to even drop their club captain. If Harry Maguire played, I think it would have been a different game as well. But regardless of that, I think, it's just people are overreacting a little bit over the result and over the start of the season. Liverpool just haven't been very lucky so far. Obviously, the Darwin Núñez suspension against Crystal Palace, against Fulham, it was a slow start, and I just think, with the Fulham game as well, the momentum of the newly promoted Premier League team away as well, with the home crowd spurring them on, I think you're going to run into those sort of results. And I think there's not necessarily that much to worry about.
Well, try telling that to some of the people in the comments. There's some heated debate going on, which we always like to see. We have one from Kumar, which I think sums up a kind of the general feeling. He says our midfield has stagnated. Lallana left, Gini left, and we signed Thiago, who's already 31. We have 2 highly injury-prone midfield players in Ox and Naby. We need new midfielders. You mentioned the injury crisis that has engulfed the club. A lot of that is focused on the midfield, and a result like this has naturally raised the question again among fans: do we need someone else? So clearly, you're not as concerned about this one particular result, but do you see a wider need to get in another midfielder?
Yeah, I am concerned about the midfield. I think that was the only thing in that game that was concerning to see in terms of the shape of it, and the lack of energy in it as well. I think the only positive I could say about that midfield was when Henderson pressed up high. I can't remember if it was in the second or the first half, and Liverpool almost had a sort of half chance from it when he won the ball up high of the field just outside United's penalty area. But apart from that, in terms of the pressing, it was non-existent, and I think the stats showed United sprinted more and they outran the Liverpool midfield, and I think that was concerning.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this proliferation of sprint stats and particularly distance covered this season. They really seem to be going in on it, particularly on Sky. I think maybe there's being overplay, but it wasn't good. It certainly wasn't enjoyable to watch. And much as we all like Milner and we all know he's played a valuable part on and off the pitch since coming in, and he's one of the best free transfers in the history of the club. The fact is he's 36. And I don't think it was ever part of the plan for him to be starting at Old Trafford. The question is the right midfielder available? That's what all the talk is. Liverpool aren't going to go out and buy just anyone. Do you think this is a situation akin to when Kabak and Davies came through the door and we just needed bodies? Or do you think it hasn't quite reached that extreme yet? There are players who'll be back soon. And if the club want to hold on for, say, someone like a Bellingham next summer, that still makes the most sense.
I just think not necessarily. We're not at that stage yet. But I am concerned that we're supposedly, I mean, that's the rumours, we're going all out for Bellingham, when I don't think he's necessarily going to solve all of Liverpool's problems. He's still an extremely young player. And if you look at his Dortmund performances, he is very inconsistent. He's still learning the game, still learning his trade. And you look at Jadon Sancho, who scored for United. He hasn't had the easiest of times settling into the Premier League. So if Liverpool are banking on just one player alone to solve all their problems, I think that is a concern. I do think there are options out there this summer. Maybe not Caicedo, because I think Brighton will demand an extortionate sum for him. But the likes of Konrad Laimer's available, Felix Neuhaus. I think there are options out there, and I think Liverpool can certainly still have time to invest. And I do think ultimately, considering the age of Liverpool's midfield, you need more than one midfielder in there, and not just Bellingham alone. And considering how much he will cost, I would be a bit reticent to go all out for him.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And at least Harvey Elliott has been the one sort of bright spark of the season. So it's not like Liverpool quite need to start from scratch in that midfield. They have one player who does look very much like the future of that centre of the park. But there's an interesting comment in the chat from Mitch. He says, Bobby's heat map not concern you. He was in the centre circle the whole game. Whether that was a deliberate ploy to try and support the slightly weakened midfield, or whether it was just the way his game is. Of course, he's always liked dropping deep, but he hasn't looked anywhere near as effective for quite a long time now. Of course, he's some way down the pecking order when everyone's fit, but that highlights the issues Liverpool have in attack right now as well. Is that somewhere where we'd be looking in the transfer market as well, or is that a case of waiting on the injury returns and, of course, the suspension return?
I mean, straight after the game, that's the first thing I wrote about for Liverpool.com. It's the lack of sort of attacking options, and I think Firmino highlighted to Klopp that you got rid of Sadio Mane, Takumi Minamino, and Divock Origi this summer. That right now Liverpool do look a little light in attack, especially in the number 9 role, and I think that's one of the reasons why Liverpool lacked a threat at the beginning of the game anyway, to attack United. Firmino, though he didn't necessarily look comfortable in that role, although he made the number 9 his position for the false number 9 his position for a long time at Liverpool. But this time around, I think obviously Klopp is trying, as he said, he's trying to evolve the team. He's trying out a new sort of style, a new sort of system, and it's clear that Firmino doesn't really fit into that as the number 9. And I think that was evident in this performance, the way he was drifting back. And I certainly think Liverpool could do with another addition there. But in terms of that, it is going to be a tricky one, because finding a player of Minamino or Origi's quality who can step up and it can deliver on a regular basis is extremely hard, especially with about a week left until the end of the transfer window.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a case of one issue compounding the other as well. Klopp mentioned just slightly after the game, which is actually what I'm writing about now, that there's 5 fit senior midfielders and he has to play 3 of them, and he can't go to a 2 really because of the lack of depth in attack right now, particularly with the Nunez suspension. Like, there's been a lot of talk about 4-2-3-1 as the potential evolution next step for this team, but that's been delayed because the personnel just isn't there for it. So yeah, between the 2 issues, it's really not easy. And then, of course, that's before touching on the defence, where Van Dijk's had 3 separate partners already. So yeah, it's tricky, because when you look at the starting 11, it looks like a strong team and a team that should be able to perform pretty well. But when you actually go through it man for man, there are problems just everywhere. And I think probably that's what we're seeing right now. It's pretty grim when it's at the start of the season, because it feels like there's a much bigger issue at play than there perhaps is. But do you think maybe the fact that they've happened while we're still in the transfer market could be a curse as much as a blessing, in the sense that it's spawning all of this conversation. It's putting pressure on to sign new players when, if these injuries had happened a couple of months later, everyone would have just sort of got on with it.
I don't think they would have got on with it. I think everyone would have been moaning why Liverpool didn't invest in the window to begin with. I think the transfer window is kind of fortunate that it happened while the transfer window is still open, because if Liverpool do want to address those problems, they still have time and they can do so. So I think it's probably a good thing that it happened now rather than in, let's say, October time, when we're approaching the World Cup and there's still a long time to go until the transfer window. So I think the fact that it happened now, the fact that it's exposing Liverpool's depth now, may force the Liverpool hierarchy to sort of change their attitude and think differently.
Well, time will tell. There's not that much of it left, but as you say, there is still time. There's other names out there. It's not Bellingham or bust, as you mentioned. It could be in midfield. It could be in attack. It could be no one at all. Time will tell, and we'll be keeping you up to date with every twist, every rumour until that window closes. For now, that just about does us. Thanks to everyone who's joined in the comments. Some lively debates going on in there this morning. Be sure to tune in again tomorrow when we'll be back, and keep an eye on Liverpool.com throughout the day. Thanks a lot.